Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. That was supposed to look so cool, and the podcast people just aren't going to get it. But and we checked it out before the show,
and it worked fine.
We had a glow-in-the-dark Ouija board, turned out all the lights, and it looked like it was floating around. And well, actually, when it came time to do the show, it looked like crap. Nobody could see anything, and we were all wondering what was going on.
So we apologize for that.
So welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live, as you can tell from our confusion here, October 29th, which is close to Halloween, which is why we were doing all this. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week after quite an absence way too long.
Yes.
Ashley Perrien, former host and co-host and all-around general guru. And he's the reason, of course, that I have no hair.
No. My most important influence to date.
So thank you all for tuning in. We welcome everybody. For those of you listening via podcast, you didn't miss anything. We thought we were going to shortchange you on the video aspect, but clearly we didn't. So
what you saw is exactly what the people at home saw.
Yep, blackness. Well, they got to see the titles.
Okay,
there's little pop-ups things say that the Atheist Experience. Anyway, moving on. This is a live, interactive, public access television show sponsored by the atheist community of Austin. It's an opportunity for atheists in the area to interact with the public, answer questions, talk about issues, provide some modest amount of education and discussion, just have some fun in general. The ACA is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. They have weekly meetings at Romeo's on Barton Springs. Every Sunday at 11:30, except for the third Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series. Now, the month of November is going to be completely different. We're going crazy, not just in the studio, but in general. What's going to happen is actually this coming Sunday, which would be the 5th, we'll have the lecture at the Austin History Center that's at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. I don't have the lecture details here because we were scrambling before the show. The following Sunday, November 12th, would be a board meeting, and we'll have the board meeting. All the ACA board members will be there. But we're going to be doing the event at Ventana del Sol. The information is available at the website, www.atheist-community.org. If you're an ACA member or a potential ACA member or somebody who's just generally shown an interest and not come to the events, and you've been waiting for one event to come to, this would be the one. Come on down. We want to check out this venue, see if it's a good place for us to host future events. The information's available on the website. I'd like to get a lot of people down there so we can get some good feedback. And it'll be a short little, get some food. I'll talk a little bit about the state of the ACA, who we are and what we do. Then there'll be a short presentation after that, kind of a mini lecture, and then a board meeting after that. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a biweekly internet audio program called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS. And you can find out more about that show at nonprofitsradio.com or via a link from the atheist-community.org site. That program is hosted by Jeff D., co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, features Russell Glasser and myself. We will be live again this coming Saturday, November 4th at 2 p.m. Central. We don't take live calls the way this show does, but what we do is we have a chat room or an IRC client running, and you can join in. The information is available on the website. Talk with us. We have a lot of fun. There's even a drinking game, evidently, that we've inspired with the chat room, where every time we say asshat, you have to take a drink. And that's been a lot of fun. And we've added to it. So pretty much whenever we do a funny accent or a weird voice, they take a drink. Basically, we got a bunch of drunks in our chat room. But we love them. We have a good time, and we're always looking for more people to participate, because one of the big things that we end up doing on the nonprofits, which wasn't by design, it just kind of happened over time, is we get a lot of email to both programs now that they're both being podcast from around the world. And there's, we don't have the time to respond to all of them, but we will pick out a select group of emails and answer them. We've been doing that on the Nonprofit Show. I might start doing some of it on here so that we can answer questions earlier in the show. And you can email, as it shows on the screen, tv@atheist-community.org with any questions or feedback or comments. We can't promise to answer all of them. Some of them might make it on the air. We may be adding some of that to this show, but it happens a lot on the nonprofits. And sometimes people ask questions that we can't answer. I know that should shock people. It doesn't surprise me a bit, because there's plenty of things that, may not be answerable, but there's, we don't know everything. But having the folks in the chat room, between the 20, 30, 40, 50 people, however many show up, somebody there's got some information that might be useful. So we had somebody write in to ask if there was some kind of help mechanism or a place that they could go to learn more about what's the best way to tell religious family members that you're an atheist, if you've changed your religious views. And I know that the American Atheist organization has a page specifically devoted to that. But I couldn't come up with it off the top of my head, and we were busy doing a show, and sure enough, the folks in the chat room are ready to chime in with not only the page that I knew about, but others that I wasn't familiar with. So we're very grateful to all those folks. We're happy about all the people who are listening to the podcast around the world and writing us. It's a great thing.
And I think as a slight clue, we have this podcast going, and we don't have any good solid numbers of how many are actually listening to it.
Yeah.
Until a couple weeks ago, when a computer glitch meant that this show's podcast didn't go up for about a half a week, and we got a flood of emails saying, "What happened?
Yeah, where's our show?"
Exactly.
So
I mean, it's like, okay, people, calm down.
You get some emails. You get some people who are regular callers and regular emailers, and you get people who are participating. Like, for example, the wiki that Russell and I have started up, ironchariots.org. There's a lot of people contributing on that, but you never really know because the cable companies don't track how many people are watching. For all I know, I might have just been talking to nobody if it weren't for the fact that we get calls. But yeah, as soon as the podcast didn't go up, in come the emails.
We know about it.
What happened? And or if it goes up with an error, there's an audio glitch where the first 10 minutes you can't hear. But we appreciate all of it. We wish we could answer all of them, but we're just thankful that people are out there listening. And please spread the word. I noticed the other day, and I think I've mentioned this before, my TiVo, the latest TiVo service includes the ability to access podcasts on your TiVo.
Oh, neat.
Along with games and shopping and other crap that they threw in with their internet access if you have a network TiVo. But yeah, there's a podcast service right in there. I've got the Atheist Experience and Nonprofits podcast automatically coming into my TiVo, which is kind of odd because since I'm on them, I don't actually listen to them. I just check every week to make sure that they've gone out. And,
nice to have the collection.
It's good stuff. Since we've already talked about it, it's kind of pointless to mention the audio portion of this program is available on the podcast, especially if people are actually listening to this.
In case you didn't know.
On the podcast. In addition to the programs that we sponsor and the lectures and the meetings, we also sponsor social events like the Atheist Happy Hour. That's Thursdays at Ninfa's on Anderson near 183 and I-35. Starts at 7:30. It's a chance to come down, have some drinks, have some dinner, talk to some of the people in the ACA. Also, after this program, we're on the air till 6 o'clock, and then around 6:30 or so, we go to Threadgill's on Riverside. And all of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to come down and visit with us. You can meet not only Ashley and I, but anybody. Most of the people behind the scenes will be there, along with some other ACA members and some other listeners and viewers who aren't a part of the ACA. So sometimes there's 8 people there, and sometimes there's 25, 26 or more. But you're welcome to come down and join us and have a meal and talk a little bit. However, if you're coming down to preach or proselytize or provoke, just stand by and pick up your phone. We'll have the number up for you shortly, and we'll have some discussions. Which reminds me, on last week's show, there was a guy who called in, and some people felt that I hung up on him way too quick.
Okay.
Did you? Or did you hear it?
I can't remember. Who was on last week?
It was me and Jeff.
Yes, I did watch that.
Yeah, and I talked to a bunch of people involved with the show who thought I might have hung up on him too quick, and part of the reason was that I thought Jeff's answer was more than sufficient. His analogy with regard to Pluto and making that analogous to scientific knowledge about the unknown, I thought was sufficient. And the guy had this kind of postmodernist, you can't really know anything, issue going on. But the thing is that for fear that anybody might think that these guys are afraid to debate. No, we're not. I'm not going to debate people who are going to waste my time. If you're going to ask pointless questions that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, like he started off by asking what degrees do you have? Well, it doesn't matter. A piece of paper doesn't say what you know. I mean that's more of a setup for an ad hominem than anything. But, regardless,
I have seen a couple times where callers call in repeatedly.
Yeah.
And we get the same caller every week, every other week, a couple times a month, whatever. And he'll start off sounding very intelligent, asking perfectly reasonable questions, but we know exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
And we know it's going to take 10 minutes to get there, and it's going to be pointless time in between. And so we rush to the final answer and say, look, it's not consistent because of this and blah, 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 and then we're off.
But if that caller wants to call back in, or if anybody wants to call in, that's fine, and I'll try and exercise a little more, I don't know, patience before I hang up on you for being stupid. That's the end of all the announcements and everything else. I guess, did you have some Halloween news?
I have one, not exactly news story, but an article that somebody is trying to get published in one of the physics and I can't remember what other journal he's going to attempt to publish this in. But it's basically a Halloween-based article. It talks about cinema fiction versus physics reality of ghosts, vampires, and zombies. And it talks about, it starts off with ghosts and the sudden cold when you're walking in a room and you get this chill down your spine and it's an indication of a ghost or something. The article's odd in that it goes first into this long discussion of how heat is transferred, and heat is actually just energy moving from one place to another, and there's convection, conduction, radiation. Why it goes into that, I'm not sure, because then he just says, this is not really a reasonable thing to be concluding that it's a ghost because, well, if you're living in an old house and it's creaky and drafty and you think it's haunted, then every time you get, a draft coming in from the floor above you, you're going to attribute that to ghosts rather than a chill coming from the floor above you, and things like that. And so it goes into that, but it explains this is something that people rationalize in their mind. They think that this place is haunted. They've set themselves up for it, especially when you've got these ghost tours in houses and stuff like that. This house is haunted, and ghost such and such was seen over there and often climbs the stairs and such. So when you're climbing the stairs, if there's any kind of a breeze, that's the ghost. And then it also talks about in ghosts, the inconsistency of the notion of materialistness, which basically means that everyone who explains ghosts says that they're non-material. Ghosts are not actually made of anything. You can't trap them in a jar or something because there's no physical body there. But then it goes on to say, how can they walk? How can they do anything? Because you obviously have to be putting your feet on the floor and pushing off on the floor to actually gain motion.
Yeah, it reminds me of all those sci-fi shows, and you've seen it probably hundreds of times on TV, especially like Star Trek or maybe Charmed or Buffy or whatever. Somebody gets out of phase with reality so that they can walk through walls and people walk through them, and yet they're walking on the same floor that everybody else is. So it looks really stupid.
Yeah, but they can walk through walls, as you said.
Yeah.
The only thing I was saying, I actually got this. This is a full article. It's about 10 pages, 9.5 pages or so. It was actually from a news article that I saw in the paper, and they only talked about how ghosts walk on the floor but can walk through walls, and basically saying, well, you've got to have one or the other. Either you can't walk on anything and you fall around, or everything in the physical world stops you. The only thing I was thinking about that is, again, people are going to rationalize this by saying houses have been redecorated and remodeled. And when this person lived 50 years ago, there was a door there, which has since been plastered over. And so now that they're kind of replaying their energy, it's able to walk on the floor, which hasn't changed, and through a wall, which has changed.
Although it is occupying a different position in space.
Different position in space, yes, but...
I mean, the Earth moves.
But again, people talk about ghosts being attached to objects.
Yeah.
And so if they're attached to the house, their movement in the house is...
It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
It's a big
The
old
end of the
fat
day,
rationalization.
Exactly. It's just a whole bunch of people trying to figure out a way to believe their fantasies. And well,
Meanwhile, there's probably 20 ghost hunter shows on TV. I realize
know.
that's an exaggeration.
I know. I don't know about that. And it also goes into Newton's first law and Newton's third law about action and reaction and such. The next one it talks about is vampires.
Uh-oh.
And this one was actually kind of fun. It's an angle that I just hadn't thought of before. And it basically says, let's assume that the first vampire appeared in 1600. And they look back at census numbers or whatever they have, and they have an estimate of the global population of 500 million people at that time, give or take. And they take the idea that one vampire eats or turns one other person into a vampire once a month. They feed once a month. Relatively conservative, so we'll run with that. What they figure is that if that happens, the entire population of humans will be gone and turn into vampires within 2 years. It's actually just over 2 years. Because the first month, you have 1 vampire. The next month, 2. Then 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. It doubles every single month.
It's like the old thing that we, most of us probably heard when we were kids, which was, how to make a fortune on your allowance, which is, Dad, if you'll pay me a penny this week,
Exactly.
and 2 pennies next week,
Exactly.
and double it,
Yeah, double it every week.
you're a
Within a
millionaire.
month, you're a millionaire type thing, yeah. This goes on to say,
Not week per month, but days per month.
yeah. Well, this actually takes 30 months, and 500 million people will now be vampires, according to this. So that's an angle that I hadn't thought of before.
Clearly, there's some kind of, supreme vampire council that tries to maintain population control by staking each other. So
Exactly, they give out food
they don't
stamps.
compete
You may
over
only feed every 3rd month. So
you can feed every 3rd month, but you hit the blood bank in between. Hit the donations.
And the last one it goes into is zombies.
Now, these are real. Zombies are real.
And that's kind of what he talked about.
I see them all the time.
In a sense,
I see them watching TV.
there's a basis for it. But there are 2 different zombie portrayals. One is Dawn of the Dead and things like that, where one zombie bites another and they die and turn into a zombie eventually.
Brains.
That has the same problem as the vampires. They run out eventually. So that one's out. But the other one is just where it's a curse or a hex or something like that, and people turn into zombies. And that one actually, they said, could somehow possibly be based on fact. They talk about a story of a guy named Wilfred, who was in Mexico, and basically he was a kid. And he got really sick. He essentially died. They couldn't find any life signs on him, basically, no heart rate or anything, so they buried him. And a couple days later, he came wandering back into town, and he was basically just, kind of walking around. He couldn't focus on anything, couldn't talk, didn't know where he was, didn't know who he was, he was like the zombie in TV shows. And it turns out that there are poisons out there which can theoretically do this kind of thing.
Blowfish poison.
Exactly. TTX, tetrodotoxin. What it essentially does is within 25 minutes of getting this poisoning, you essentially start losing motor control. You basically just become paralyzed. Too much of it and everything gets paralyzed, your heart stops, you stop breathing. And people are normally conscious throughout this. Like until just a minute or 2 before death, they are fully conscious, they just can't do anything.
Made a movie about it. Serpent in the Rain.
Yeah, I have heard of that. I think I might have actually seen it.
It's entertaining. There was an episode of one of the CSIs had an episode where a guy poisoned his friend with blowfish poison in order to fake his death.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're not walking around going.
Exactly. They're laying down essentially dead because you're almost paralyzed. Your heart rate is so slow that if somebody just comes up to you and tries to feel your pulse, they're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
So you are almost dead. Now what they're saying is if you're lucky enough to survive through this, then you usually recover with no problems. You'll be perfectly fine after, a couple days or something like that. Unless they bury you. Because then if you're in a small coffin, you're running out of oxygen. And if you run out of oxygen for too long, you become severely brain damaged. And so what they're kind of expecting is, again, theoretically what could have happened is this Wilfred was poisoned, they buried him, he woke up, and basically just through oxygen deprivation and, the effort of digging himself out, that's when he just got severe brain damage. So theoretically, that kind of thing could happen, but they're not actually undead. They are very much alive, just in a bad, bad state. So who knows if that actually happens, but again, they're talking to ex-voodoo priests and scientists who are saying that there are blowfish that are native to the Haitian Islands. This toxin is actually in their organs, and every year there's a couple hundred deaths of people who eat blowfish and get really, really sick from it. So who knows? Zombies could be somewhat real. But
I think
that's
it's
it.
kind of an example of how somebody takes something that is a real phenomena that they don't understand and can't explain.
Exactly.
And they spin it up with some kind of supernatural nonsense, and the better story you put on it, the more believable it becomes to everybody.
Exactly. So, but yeah, even if these people, even if this were to actually happen, chances are they're not going out there going brains. So that's
Well, we
unlikely.
went ahead and put the number up.
Yes.
And being a live call-in show, anybody out there who wants to call in and talk about Halloween topics or anything else, feel free to give us a call. I wrote down a couple notes about Halloween, this being the season. We're going to use the Ouija board here to try and identify the callers that are calling in ahead of time and maybe ask it some other questions. We won't be able to zoom in, though, because it puts a big glare on the cameras sometimes. So you just have to take our word that we're just not making this stuff up.
Trust us.
It's, we're honest folks. We would never do anything, sneaky. But, basically one of the things that, I found, and this shouldn't be too much new knowledge for most people, because you hear stories about it or the history of Halloween. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit. The Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, in America, a lot of folks call it Samhain, but that's actually the wrong pronunciation. It's Samhain or Samhain,
Okay.
Which is the Celtic word for November, really. And it means summer's end. It's the end of summer.
Okay.
And it was tied to a bunch of pagan traditions, like a festival harvest type situation, and the changing of the seasons and everything else. It became Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, in 835 when Pope Gregory III moved All Saints' Day, which used to be May 1st, to be the end of the Easter season. He moved it to November 1st, right after this pagan holiday. And, I don't want to speak to his motives. He might not have actually been trying to co-opt somebody else's religious holiday. But considering how often this goes on, let's see, Christmas, it's not surprising that, hey, there's a competing religion here. Why don't we move our holiday so it coincides with theirs? And then all of a sudden it's ours. The move gave Halloween a Christian spin. In much the same way, Jesus, if he actually existed, was not born in December. Pretty much every Christian at Halloween, at Christmas time, here's the birth story, and almost any of them will freely admit, nah, he wasn't born in December. It was probably sometime in the spring if he was born. Well, they wouldn't say if he was born. I would,
He
but
was born.
it was sometime in the spring. Well, then why is it celebrated in December? Oh, well, it turns out, there were these Roman pagan holidays around then, and we just felt like it'd be a good idea to mesh them together, so we'd have to give out, maybe it was so they didn't have to give so many people vacation pay from work. I'm a dual religion. I'm dual citizen. I'm dual religion.
Only one set of holiday cards.
Yeah, But, and then oddly, taking a page out of the Christian playbook, some neo-pagan religions, Wiccans, etc., have understanding the origins of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, have co-opted their religion.
Okay. Yes.
And even though that the modern Wiccans and neo-pagan movement has nothing to do with the original origins of Samhain or Samhain or however they want to pronounce it, I don't know. I'm not Celtic, but they've kind of re-co-opted it, and what it does is it serves two purposes. One, it gives them some, and I'm putting air quotes for you podcast people, credibility, in that it ties their modern religion to something ancient. And as we all know, the older your religion is, the more likely it is to be true. Mm-hmm. Whatever. But it's, if you think people got the truth thousands of years ago, wrote it down in a holy book, and we haven't learned anything since, then you're living on a different planet than I am. But in fairness, I'd like to point out, since we end up talking about Christians and Christianity a lot, that yes, Virginia, atheists think Wiccan religion is just as silly as all the rest of them. The difference being that they don't tend to force their beliefs on everybody else around them.
Yes.
Halloween, oddly enough, didn't become an American holiday until the 19th century, and neither did Christmas. The Puritan influence,
That's right, yeah.
The Puritan influence basically said, what I'm saying today, that, this is a holiday of pagan origin and Christians shouldn't be worshiping and celebrating these holidays, so we're not going to. And then, of course, in the 19th century...
Well, I don't know if it was so much that. I seem to remember something possibly that they didn't celebrate birthdays. And since this was essentially considered a birthday...
Halloween wasn't.
I thought Christmas.
Christmas is a birthday.
Yes.
But Halloween isn't.
True.
Halloween
but
also
they're not
is
celebrating Christmas.
Yeah, but
and other holidays
their big
for the
complaint was
same
that these were pay origins. Plus, there's that whole thing about Christmas trees and whether or not you're supposed to decorate them in the Bible. But so you had this Puritan influence, and nobody really celebrated Halloween or Christmas. But now Halloween, much like Christmas, has become a secularized holiday. It seems to be the one time a year when it's okay to make fun of all superstitions, and including those of the most popular religions, angels and devils and other beings that believers would ordinarily consider to be real. You'll even find believers dressing up in devil costumes and kind of lampooning these symbols of evil. And it doesn't seem to register that, if you were a real believer and you really thought that there was a devil, dressing up like him might not be the smartest thing you could do. Hey, look, I got horns and a tail. You ain't scaring me.
Do not mock the evil one.
But it's worth noting that there are some Christians, some fundamental sects and other things that say that's still considered a pagan holiday. They don't celebrate. They don't let their kids go trick or treating or dress up or anything like that. Or
AKA
they cop out.
Killjoys.
Yeah, they cop out sometimes, and instead of going the spooky Halloween route, we're going to dress you up as baby Jesus and Spider-Man and go out and hand out chick tracts.
Yeah.
I hate chick tracts, and Russell's done really good work on the wiki at ironcharities.org. He's taken some of Jack Chick's tracts and just demolished them panel by panel, which has been a lot of fun.
Interesting.
But personally, I think that the fundamentalists that are opposed to this, that it's more out of their own fears of the reality of demons than out of a dogma that that they think they're violating. Man, it's just a bit of fun. It's nothing more. It's a chance to get kids to dress up and go out and solicit some free tooth decay and attempt to scare each other a little bit.
And actually, it was kind of interesting. In looking through articles and such for the show, I was looking for hell houses. Went to one several years back and had a blast. And I know that there aren't, or at least I haven't heard of any going on in town this year. And I came across a judgment house, which apparently they're doing one or two places also. It's basically just like a hell house, but a little bit different. You follow the lives of two different teenagers in there, and basically at the end of this, little skit where they go through school and they're doing drugs and blah, 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 then they're brought to the judgment before God, and one they throw in hell and the other gets to live in happiness and holiday. And
let me guess, the one that had the crappy life that made all the wrong choices accepted Jesus at the end and went to heaven, and the other one that lived a good life went to hell. See, that's the way you're supposed to do this.
That's the way it should have been done, yes. I don't think it was probably done that way.
I don't think those people have read enough chick tracts.
Exactly. But
the Bible for Dummies. Hey, this thing's make Reader's Digest look like War and Peace.
But I think a judgment house would have been a fun one to go to. Because, I know the reviews that Martin was the host on the show a couple of years back, and he wrote up a review. It was me, him, and a couple other friends went down to one of the hell houses after a show one time, and it was a good time. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed going to it and seeing what it was and everything. And we didn't do anything. I think Martin wore his, atheist t-shirt or something, but none of us did. We didn't protest. We didn't say anything. We just went through the show and had a good time and laughed. And then at the end, they bring you into this chat after they bring you down into hell, and they say, you better be right, because if you don't believe and live like you believe, then blah, blah, blah. Pascal's wager. Then they lead you out into a chapel, and they have a little sermon there saying, we hope you come to our church, and if you're not right, then do you want to convert, and stand and pray with us if you will. And we just kind of sat and thinking, okay, I'm not convinced yet. But the person behind us, the one person who came through with us, stood up and prayed. And then on the way out, we just started walking out, and they had some guy from the church there with a camera saying, we're interviewing some of the people coming out and want to know what you thought about it. And we got into about a 20-minute, half an hour debate about the whole religion and just everything. We weren't provoking, they were just answering questions and such, and it was a great time. And they finally, some of the other people came over and said, okay, you guys have got to go, when the crowd was growing rather large and the crowd at the door was growing rather small. So
our cameraman actually went to Hell House this year and said one of the newer events that was, or newer portions that was different from previous years, was this thing on the Psychic Friends Network, which
they railed off against the psychics.
I found kind of amusing.
Oh, that's
I guess
funny.
I think they actually said Psychic Friends Network, which is now defunct. So I guess they waited till they couldn't be sued before they picked on a specific entity. But
that's funny.
But we brought the Ouija board in. We were going to predict who was on the phone, and so far this thing hasn't moved, and the phone doesn't have anybody on it. So
That's kind of creepy.
I know. There must be
must
something
be real.
not moving this. But I brought it in for a reason, because as a kid, and I'll turn this one up. This one's the I don't know, the mystifying oracle, Ouija, the mystifying oracle. It'll blind the cameras, I'm sure. But as a kid, I was warned away from these. As being raised in a fundamentalist a home, because these are a way to contact Satan or evil spirits. You can't open up your mind to allow Satan to get in. But in studying later on, it turns out that that's just not the case. What actually makes this it's got a little thing called a planchette, and you put your fingers on it, and both, however many people you have will set their fingers on it, and eventually it starts moving around. Ooh. And you ask it questions, and it's got like a yes, no, and numbers, and goodbye, and letters, and spells stuff out. And it turns out that what's actually moving that is something called the ideomotor reflex, or the ideomotor effect, which is unconscious, I guess, or subconscious movements of the hands.
Yes.
And even though you don't realize that this is what's actually happening, I'm sure that some people will consciously move it around. Like, if I was to say, does this thing actually contact spirits? Holy cow, it went right up to no really quick. And of course I intentionally did that. But when people are playing with it, you have several people's hands on it, and since you're not actively doing something and they're not actively doing something, all of a sudden it seems like maybe something's going on.
Yeah.
But that reflex, which has been well studied scientifically, even by Faraday ages ago, is used in a lot of other ways other than the Ouija board. And I don't know how many people have seen it. I brought in a piece of string. They would tie something to the string. Okay. Whether it be like something significant, maybe a ring or whatever, so that it'd hang down, and you hold it in your hand without moving it. You ask questions, and the string will move. And if it moves, back and forth, then it's one answer, and forward and back's another, and around in a circle's another. And I've seen like all the old wives' tales of women trying to predict whether or not a pregnant woman's going to give birth to a boy or a girl based on what they do,
what the hanging string does
with this piece of string. And the cool thing, I started earlier about the zombies, and how the type of story you make to explain this unknown effect is what lends it significance. So if you just did it with a piece of string, it wouldn't be very impressive. But what you tie on the end of it, if you can come up with a compelling story about it, it's a crystal that you tie on there, or the person's wedding ring, or maybe a battery. You could make up some story. It's got energy.
Exactly.
They're tapping power. Tapping into this contained power. Crystals. That's one that's gotten a lot of popular. And I don't want to imply that the crystals are some new thing, even just because they're involved in this new age. I'm sure that
they've been out there for a while.
I'm sure that in ancient times, when you're digging around in the rocks and you find one that's pretty, and lets light through and distorts light and everything else, that it's mysterious and spooky, but it kind of gained credence with the New Age movement in our modern times, and this is so sad, because of things like the piezoelectric effect. Because we find out that you pump current, that rocks resonate at certain frequencies. And plus there's all this other stuff that people don't understand about, atoms and frequencies and quantum mechanics and everything else. And boy, if you can make it sound scientific, all of a sudden it's amazing. I mean, homeopathy and all these other things, people are buying into chakras and feng shui and just
and the idea you put the magnet here, and because there's iron in your blood, it attracts blood to this area, which can then, help the healing type thing. I mean, it's something where, again, you put in, the electromagnetic effect and the ferrous iron in your blood and stuff like that. I mean, you put a white lab coat on and you throw in some spiffy terms, and people who don't know any better are going to say, wow, well, that sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah.
And they spend $20 on a magnetic bracelet. So.
Yeah, you take something that people don't understand very well and throw in some common sense terms and then throw in a few extra scientific-y words. Yeah. And all of a sudden you can convince them that what they're doing is, or that this is, a good way to spend their money or anything else. Yeah. So I saw the phone thing light up. You want to see who it is?
But it's not moving.
Well, they're still trying to find out. Let's see if we can ask the ouija who it is. You ready? Wait, it's moving. Is it somewhere between C and D? We'll make up a new letter to fit in there. Maybe it's CD's CDI V. Is that it?
I'll go with a V.
Yes, that's it. CDIV. So let's check it out. Hey, CDIV, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Are you CDIV?
No.
This thing doesn't work for crap. What's your name?
Listen, I was just trying to figure out what exactly you don't believe in.
Well, this for one.
It's really an odd situation. I'm kind of glad you brought it up. It's an odd situation because normally you wouldn't define yourself by what you don't believe in. And yet, one thing we're spending a lot of time talking about is that atheism is the lack of belief in a God or gods.
But you can't define what God is.
Well, that's not my job. See, the thing is that for any given definition of God that's been presented, I don't believe it. So, but I haven't heard them all. And if somebody has a new definition or explanation or idea about God, they're welcome to present it. And as long as they're able to convince me, then okay, I'll believe in your God. If you said, this piece of string was your God, well, it obviously exists, so I would believe in it. More important than what I could list off all the things that I don't believe exist or don't believe are real, anything supernatural or anything like that.
But what is supernatural?
Anything beyond nature.
And that's defined through logic and reasoning?
Sure. If you can't provide reasonable, empirical, confirmable, falsifiable evidence and logical argument for what you're claiming, then there's no good reason to suppose that it exists. I mean, it's not naturalism, realism, those philosophical positions, they're not just a kind of a handy way to denounce the supernatural. It's a way of saying we need to find out what's real and what's not real. Everybody agrees on that for the most part. So what tools are we going to use to try and determine what's real? One thing that religions advocate is faith in divine revelation. And I would admit that if there was a God and he directly revealed some truth to me, that would be an absolutely unshakable way of knowing the truth. But it's a truth that only applies to me because I'm the only one who revealed that, who got that revelation. And until such time as I do, it certainly can't be true to me. So it's more important to find evidence.
But you have to believe in your tools. You have to believe in logic.
Sure, you have to believe that science and logic are valuable tools for distinguishing fact from fantasy.
But logic can't prove everything.
Can't prove everything.
Like if I say, a very simple example, one that's easy to argue with, is if I say this sentence is false, if I say what I'm saying now is false,
right?
You can't prove that. It's unprovable. And one of the major axioms out of mathematics
that's a contradiction.
No logical system is both complete, explains everything, and self-consistent.
Are you a postmodernist?
No, I'm not a postmodernist.
So you
If I were gonna
you do
define
think that there are
myself-
things that we
and-
can know and learn and identify.
If I were going to define myself, I'd call myself a scientist.
Okay.
And so that makes more sense to me than you saying you don't believe in something. If you said you were a scientist, I'd understand that. But I don't understand exactly what you're saying.
In the conventional sense, I don't go around calling myself a scientist because I tend to have a lot more respect than to toss that word around as a definition, as an explanation of myself. I am a proponent of science. I'm a proponent of the scientific method, falsifying ideas. I'm a huge fan of empirical evidence, and more importantly, independent confirmation. That one of the reasons there's some philosophical positions that would consider the senses properly basic, which means that we automatically assume that what we're getting through our senses is correct. I don't buy that because our senses can be fooled. And in reality, from my point of view, the senses are generally reliable because they're independently confirmed by each other and by other peoples. And that independent confirmation is what tells me we're not looking for absolute truth. This idea of absolute knowledge that you can't absolutely prove something or absolutely prove something false isn't the important thing. What we're looking for is the best explanation, the most reasonable explanation that is consistent with evidence.
But there you come up against your imagination because we just can't think of everything.
Well, that doesn't
We
matter.
don't have enough knowledge.
It doesn't matter so much if you can imagine some other possibility. If I drop this pencil, did it fall because angels pulled it down, or?
What I'm trying to say is, imagination is the only thing that brings us to new knowledge. If you can't use your imagination, then you're stuck in someone else's.
Who said I can't use imagination?
I'm sorry?
Who said we can't use imagination? I'm just saying that you don't imagine an answer and say that it's therefore right. Of course.
No, that's exactly what you do. That's called a scientific hypothesis.
No.
No. A hypothesis is not proven yet.
A hypothesis isn't this is the answer. I'm all in favor of using your imagination and your creativity to say what other possible answers are there. But then you actually have to go out and test that. If you just come up with an imaginary explanation and say this is the answer, that is not a good way of determining fact from fantasy.
Do you recall? There was a theorem in mathematics called Fermat's last.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Theorem. I think it was proved some number of years ago that it was true. His theorem. If he hadn't hypothesized that, it's possible that no one would have asked the question, at least not at the time that he had, and led to further knowledge.
Sure.
So while I agree with you that there are a lot of crackpot ideas out there,
yes,
I think you still need imagination.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying you don't believe something until there's sufficient evidence to justify that belief. Somebody can hypothesize about alien life on another planet, but that doesn't, and it's true. If there is some other life on another planet right now, it is absolutely true right now, but we have no way of knowing that. And until we have sufficient evidence, then there's not justification to believe it. And therefore, I would be wrong to believe that there's life on another planet right now.
But I also think you're wrong to believe in the tools that we currently have.
What better tool is there?
Additional tools will...
What better tool is there than the scientific method? You called yourself a scientist. What better tool than science?
There is no better tool. But,
there you go.
So these tools have been proven.
Currently sufficient? Is our mathematics sufficient?
It's not absolutely sufficient. I will grant you that. However, it is the best thing that we currently have, and it has been proven time and time and time again that while it may not be perfect, it's pretty good at determining the real world and what's actually happening. So yes, is it perfect? No. Is it really freaking good? Yes.
I mean,
and so until we come up with something better, why not keep going with that?
Just keep in mind that most of the time, the things people come up with are entirely wrong.
Yeah.
That's true. And it's science that shows that.
Most ideas are entirely wrong. And you just have to face the reality that there are a lot of things we're not going to know for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's nothing, you can't dampen the human spirit by saying you cannot come up with something that's out there. Because a lot of things, a lot of new ideas
you keep making
accusations
turn
into something real.
Hang on. You keep you keep saying things that we completely agree with, and yet you keep accusing us of things that we don't do.
Well,
We're not here dampening imagination.
The reason I called is because earlier you called some people morons.
Sure.
I really think that's the wrong attitude.
Well,
but
if there were people running around, just to play along for a second, if there were people running around advocating that Santa Claus was real and that we needed to make new laws based on the orders that they got from Santa Claus, don't you think they're morons?
Or very young.
Okay, they're adults. Let me add that qualifier. Are they morons now?
Well, maybe they need some analysis or something.
Yeah, maybe they do.
Can you imagine the mentality of a child that still exists in an adult?
Yes, it's called religious.
So
Those people who are still clinging
ignorant
to their invisible friends, those people who are buying into hypotheses, religious hypotheses that can't be falsified, that have no evidence to support them, and they are basing their life decisions around them, and they are imposing those beliefs upon other people, trying to make other people's life decisions based on their own beliefs. That is asinine, and you're a moron to buy into that. I'm not trying to be insulting by that. I was being humorous earlier, but it is unwise to believe in something until there's sufficient justification. And you, as somebody who advocates science and the scientific method, would you believe in something before there was evidence to justify it?
Well, I believe there are a lot of human things that are explainable. I think some people with interesting ideas like that, they could have a mental health issue.
Sure.
So, you need to be a little bit philosophical.
Okay. A little bit? So 80% of the population of the United States is Christian. Are you really trying to write all that off as 80% of the people need
Well, they
mental
might
health?
be making they're switching cause and effect there, and they're saying because these ideas are good, the religion must be true, whereas really deep down they believe the ideas, goodness between people and,
Sure.
all the good things that a lot of religious people advocate.
Okay, so now we're even more in agreement, and yet you keep having this idea that if you don't like the method, if you don't think that it's right to, I think that if somebody is an adult and is supposed to be reasonably intelligent, and I'm not talking about people who have obvious mental defects, schizophrenia or what other mental problem that they might have. The fact is that about 90% of the population believe in some kind of God, and about 75 to 80% specifically believe in a Christian God. And that they then act upon those beliefs. It's fine for them to have those beliefs. If they want to believe that, that's their prerogative. I don't want to eliminate anybody's ability or right to believe in something. But
a lot of people believed in gravity as a force until Einstein came along and said it was warping of space-time.
Because they had tons and tons and tons and tons of evidence to back up the idea of gravity.
Most people still believe in gravity.
Sure. But,
But you can't call them moron. You just need to
I
call
can
them
if I want
somewhat
to.
ignorant.
You might not think it's the best thing, and I'll agree, it's not the best. I don't come on the show specifically to do name calling, and I've spent a great deal of time on various shows making specific points about specific issues, going into great detail about the history of the biblical canon, or doing an in-depth study on a particular religion or a particular philosophy, or talking about the scientific method. We've gone into great detail on these things over and over and over again. But at some point, when you can have a reasonable discussion with somebody, and if they're still going to stay unreasonable, then you have to call a spade a spade. Now, you said earlier that you were a scientist. Are you a specific type of scientist, or is that a label you have adopted? Or
Well, I'll defer to your earlier comments. That's kind of irrelevant.
Okay, sure. It would be, except that.
So okay, all those issues are out there.
It would be irrelevant if it wasn't for the fact that you brought it up as if it was some kind of relevant label.
I don't believe I did that, but
anyway,
okay. So all these ideas are on the table, and then the other thing, the first thing I asked was, what is it you don't believe? And So when you call yourselves atheists, now you're creating yourselves, you're putting yourselves into a group of people who don't believe something.
Right.
And that seems peculiar to me.
It does, because people don't run around.
It's also provocative. And so instead of calling yourselves atheists, if you called yourselves the scientist experience or the reasoning experience.
Sure, and there's plenty of people who've adopted other labels like Brights and whatever else. People don't normally run around saying, I'm not a Dallas Cowboys fan. The thing is that theism is so pervasive in society, and it's such a big issue, that rather than there's no good name apart from rationalist, naturalist, free thinker. You can use any one of those labels. I tend to use atheist for important reasons. I think it's a significant label that has been maligned, that has been tarnished and appropriated to make people who don't believe look evil, sadistic. The secular humanists are destroying. You can put whatever label you want on it. I didn't name the show, but I like the name of the show.
I think I've taken up too much of your time, but basically I feel like it's provocative. It doesn't mean anything.
It means something.
It means a lot.
It doesn't mean anything.
It means a lot.
It's not productive, though.
You're saying it's not positive.
You're a group of people who don't believe something.
That's correct.
You can't define what you don't believe.
I do.
No.
I do. I don't believe in the God hypothesis. Whichever one has been presented to me, that's what I don't believe in.
Yes. For the most,
I'll think about it. You guys, you ought to think about the fact that it seems kind of negative.
I'm well aware that to some people it seems kind of negative. Maybe if you I don't know, you call in and you make all these accusations about what we're doing that we're not doing. We're not trying to kill the human spirit or imagination. I'm an advocate of science in the same way that you are. And I'm an advocate of human spirit and imagination and creativity in the same way that you are. So apart from the fact that you're having a knee-jerk reaction to the name, to the label atheist, which, by the way, is exactly why we're here, to eliminate that knee-jerk reaction. Because
you're really
atheism...
You're limiting yourself. Anyway, have a good one.
Okay, I'm limiting myself.
if we wanted to keep the show strictly tied to atheism, then the whole first half an hour was completely irrelevant then.
Yeah,
because none of the first half hour really relied on the fact that there is no God.
This isn't the science experience because, I'm not a science and I'm not here to teach science.
And it gets
I'm not
less
a scientist.
ratings.
I'm not a science.
And it gets less ratings. I mean, this is something that people are more likely to stop on. If you have a banner saying the scientific worldview, click on through.
Yeah.
If you got the atheist experience, people are at least going to stop and say, whoa, hang on a second. And that's important.
I agree. There are plenty of atheists out there who don't use the label for the exact same reason that the caller was just talking about, because, well, why should I define myself by what I don't believe in? That's fine. It's their choice. I happen to think it's a label that is important to use because, like Ashley was pointing out, if this was called the rationalist hour and a half, I don't know if anybody just tune in. Plus, I'm not just an atheist. I'm a lot of things. I'm a naturalist, a realist. I'm an anti-theist. I think religion, while it has done some good and can do some good and may be essential for some people, I think religion is generally a harmful thing. It promotes a mentality that faith is a virtue, that there is some better way than science to determine what is and isn't reality, that there may in fact be some, not may, but there is in fact an alternate reality, some supernatural reality in which this transcendent God exists, and he's worried about what you do with your penis. That's absolutely absurd. Oh, and he's going to kill you. Punish you for. You want to see if we can get another caller?
Okay.
I'm going to give this Ouija board thing another shot.
At least a couple chances.
Oh, that's a B.
That's kind of in the middle of B, C,
All right.
P, and Q.
U.
Okay.
L. Wait a minute. It went back to L.
Okay.
S. You're pushing it, aren't you?
I ain't doing anything.
A. Bullshit. It's the past tense. This is a ghost from the past. Sorry. I don't know who that caller is, but we'll go ahead and guess. Is your name Bullshit?
Me?
Yeah.
My name is Steven.
Steven, I'm throwing this thing out. It doesn't work.
It's still off.
This is crap. Anyway, you had a question for us.
Yeah, I'm just listening to you guys talk, and if I would imagine that you guys basically believe in what's commonly known as the Big Bang Theory. So my question to you would be, how can an explosion or the Big Bang cause something to start breathing?
It didn't.
Cause life to just form?
It
how
didn't.
can chemicals explode or matter explode into a living, breathing life?
It didn't.
So where did life come from?
What you're actually talking about, there's three different aspects of this, and people seem to confuse them. There's Big Bang cosmology, which may or may not be accurate. We don't know. Nobody was there. We have good math that comes up to, to that theory and supports it, but, it's in the past. Nobody knows. And we don't have enough information, but there's good theories. Then there's something called abiogenesis, which is life from non-life. And depending on the particular conditions, some people might say that has been proven possible to occur, but it may not have been, because we don't have an accurate model of everything with regard to the past. And then there's evolution, which is what happens to life after it begins. The website up on your screen there, talkorigins.org, is a great resource for all of this. We're not scientists. I don't know that I could probably give some reasonable explanations about Big Bang, abiogenesis, and evolution, but I don't want to butcher them. And in the end, even if you found out tomorrow that we're completely wrong about the Big Bang and completely wrong about abiogenesis and completely wrong about evolution, all that means is that those theories are wrong. It doesn't prove any other theory correct. And as we were talking about with the previous caller, when we're trying to develop a worldview, when we're trying to distinguish the real from the unreal, science is continually proven to be the best method for that. And the current scientific explanation with regard to abiogenesis, there's also other theories out there, directed panspermia and other stuff. The biggest answer is, I don't know, and neither does anybody else.
So essentially you hold faith.
Sorry?
Essentially, you hold faith in something that you don't know and that you can't prove.
No, you didn't hear what I just said. I said, I don't know what the answer is, and neither does anybody else.
Well, it seems that you would essentially have to believe that life would...
Hang on. There's a difference between knowledge and belief. I don't necessarily know something, but I can believe it to be true. And my belief is based on the evidence. And right now, the bulk of evidence points in a specific direction, and that direction is not creationism. There's no evidence for creationism.
Again, you're saying that you can't explain or can't prove
right.
how life was created from non-life. It seems to me that you basically have to hold faith in something that science will never be able to prove.
No, if you want to put it in that term, and that's what's comfortable for you, then fine. But it's not faith. Faith is belief in something without sufficient evidence, or belief in something in the face of evidence to the contrary. I don't have faith. I don't have faith in anything. I have a reasonable expectation based on previous events, based on scientific explanation, evidence, and reasoned argument. That's not faith in the sense that most people would use it.
So what scientific evidence is there that life became from non-life? What's the evidence? What evidence is there that life just appeared out of nothing? What is the evidence?
Well, one, the fact that you say it appeared out of nothing is completely and utterly wrong in every respect of the word.
Okay,
a mouse did not just appear on a rock one day. It came from something. And the fact that we know the Big Bang happened, and we know how stars and planets formed, and we know how gases got here, and we know that we exist.
Oh,
that's a good debate tactic.
Yeah.
We know that planets exist, and we know that we're here. Obviously, they must connect in some way. Therefore, I have really good evidence that life started somehow. Really good evidence. How exactly it happened, we're not sure. Check back with us in a couple of years, maybe we'll know better.
Well, we know that at some point life came from non-life.
Yes.
That has to be, whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, that happened. Unless, I guess, you buy into this idea that we always existed and that there's this infinite regress. But, let's avoid that. Accepting that, Now you can say, okay, let's see if we can find out why. Well, maybe we can, maybe we can't. All of the scientific evidence that's available points to one type of thing, and that is, the natural explanation. Now, whether or not theories about abiogenesis are exactly accurate to what did happen is completely irrelevant. If there's a competing theory, it's not like creationism wins by default. Yeah. If evolutionary theory doesn't fully explain something or doesn't accurately explain something, that just means we've got more work to do. But it doesn't mean that what we know or what we believe so far is wrong, and it certainly doesn't mean that creationism is true and accurate. You actually have to provide evidence to support your theory or your hypothesis about creationism. It's not an either or. If we can only prove evolution wrong, all of a sudden we can put prayer back in school. No, you can't, because it's still religion and it's still unproven. Science is the only thing that disproves science, and it does it all the time. I watch creationists like Kent Hovind talk about the Piltdown man and how this was a hoax, and they found one tooth, and the guy looked at it and thought that it was a combination between a man and a chimp, and they built 500 doctoral dissertations on it, and blah 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 blah. It's absurd. In the case of Piltdown man, for example, what was it that finally showed that it was a hoax? Science.
Or science.
Religious
Religious did not come along and say that's wrong.
In the entire
at least not
history,
intelligently.
The entire recorded history, when science and religion have come to competing contrary answers about something, religion's been proven wrong, or science has demonstrated itself to be right every single time. Religion's never said, you know what, we were right and science was wrong. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, and I realize that there are people out there who are going to say, of course it doesn't happen, you numbskull. I realize that there's a built-in bias there, and that science is the only thing that could possibly prove science wrong. The thing is that all this secret hidden wisdom from thousands of years ago that's tucked away on tablets and slates that tell us how things really are, they're really wrong. And we keep showing it. The gaps that they try to stick God into keep getting smaller every day, every second. But let's not consult the Ouija board. Let's just go on to, is it Steve?
Yes.
My computer beats a Ouija board any day. It told me your name was Steve.
Pretty good. I read a article this week on Wired online, basically, about atheism. It was called something like The Crusade Against Religion. And it was an article about, I guess it was due to Richard Dawkins' recent book and Sam Harris's fairly recent book, and just talking about, I guess he called it, the author called it, I guess he would call you guys the new atheists or something like that. He also talked about the emergence of lots of different local atheist groups, I think probably like the ACA is. And but what was interesting, that article and that first caller, the thing in that article was the sort of what approach people take, whether they go for sort of a anti-religion or an in-your-face, or it's more of an attack against the faith, or whether it's other people have sort of more of a, I think most people like that like to call themselves agnostics, having nothing to do with the definitions you guys repeat all the time and are very clear about. But I mean, in terms of why people pick a different name for themselves, I think they're more looking at it, well, this is what I think, but I'm not going to tell anybody else what to think, or I'm not going to actually stick my face out there and disrupt anybody's beliefs and things like that.
Being confrontational, Dawkins and Harris have stirred up the pot for sure, and being confrontational is it's not for everybody. I mean, my roommate, for example, is it's not that he's not confrontational. It's more that he doesn't see the point. He doesn't see that there's necessarily going to be a big benefit from challenging religious people. My thing is that if you're like, I don't know what the first caller's position was on religion at all. Maybe he believes in a God, a deistic God, an impersonal God. Maybe he believes in a personal God. Maybe he's an atheist who just doesn't use the label. I don't know. But my thing is that if you look around and you see what's actually happening on behalf of religion,
Right.
and you don't want to do anything for fear of offending them, you're part of the problem. I'm sorry, I realize that offends a lot of atheists and agnostics and people who just want to get along.
Right.
But in my view, and I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
If it's if you don't speak up, who's going to?
I think their speaking up is going to get to be more and more important. But I think what was
I hope it
article
becomes
kinda-
less and less necessary.
Right.
But
It
I'm
should, yeah, it
optimistic.
should just fade away. Like at some point, you would think it would just fall out of style. And
See, I
and,
think
we wouldn't
I
have to
think a
worry
lot of
about
people
it.
had that. I think a lot of people had that hope and that optimism in the late 19th century when a freethinker could get out and stand out in a city and draw a crowd of thousands and preach blatantly against the Bible, like Ingersoll did, and oh wow, look, the world's changing and we're entering this wonderful age of medicine and science, and we're going to go to the moon. And yet, somehow or another, as soon as we were quiet for a while, all of a sudden the religious backlash occurs.
Right. The article I thought sort of did, though, there was sort of a question of tactics or approaches or something that to me kind of came through in there that, if you're going to point out people's inconsistencies, I mean, in a sense, some of the arguing or discussing gets to I've pinning people down on what is basically inconsistencies in what they're believing or thinking, and that makes people uncomfortable, and it's not necessarily that quick for someone to change their mind. I mean, to get rid of the inconsistencies takes a long time, and it can come off as sort of I don't know what, just antagonistic or something.
Sure.
Beyond what's necessary to actually and actually in that article they talked about the people that were being argued with and then the people listening to the argument, and that more of the effects are done on the people that are listening to the argument than the actual participants in the argument.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I don't. If some particular, like a young Earth creationist calls in and wants to get in an argument, I don't have any illusions at all about that I'm going to change their mind.
Right.
Any discussion I'm having is more for the other people listening, so that they can, if nothing else, even if it strengthens their own beliefs, if nothing else, they've at least heard, dissenting opinions.
Right.
And hopefully, if they investigate and find out, what's the best explanation we have that is actually real. That doesn't rely on a book or some kind of supernatural magical thinking. What's the best way to explain it? Because like the callers call in, well, where did life come from? Well, okay, I have no idea. Well, all right, that's not true. I don't have an idea. I don't know for sure, and neither do you. The question is, which explanation is more reasonable? The one that there's some transcendent being who willed it all into existence, or that a long period of time has gone by and changes have occurred.
Well, or another way to divide them is how did we find out whatever it is we know? We looked at things and we saw things happening and did tests, as opposed to we made up some stories and a lot of people liked the stories,
Yeah.
and we got a bunch of people to agree with the stories, and so we decided it was true. And between those two, as far as foundation, and I don't think that looking for evidence has anything to do with blocking the imagination. I mean, I think the imagination is required to come up with the ideas that you then turn around and go after. So
Yeah, I don't. I'd like to talk to the first caller some other time. Obviously we didn't want to go on forever,
Right.
and it was nice of him to recognize that he'd been on for a while. But I have nothing against the human. I love the human imagination. I get accused by friends and relatives who are Christians of deifying man, because I'm a huge fan of intellect and imagination and creativity and all of those things, because we wouldn't be where we are today. We didn't get to put men on the moon because of Jesus. We put men on the moon because of the human imagination. Hey, look, insects fly, birds fly, maybe I can fly. Hey, you know what? That little dot isn't a pinhole on the curtain of night. It's actually something up there circling us.
And you
How
can
we
stand
get
on
there?
it.
Yeah, it's imagination that got us there. To imply that we're somehow stifling the human imagination or anything else, that's absurd.
Yeah.
It's just
But,
a
anyway,
knee-jerk reaction to atheism.
That article I thought was kind of interesting. It was available online at the Wired magazine.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good discussion of the topic.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
calling.
you.
Bye.
And also just about the idea of us being more out there, and not even atheists in general, just anyone with a viewpoint being out there. And I think podcasting is a great thing in general, just because anyone who's got an idea can now have it out there and have a relatively larger audience than they would have 10 years ago, for instance. Sure. Having access to alternate viewpoints generally makes you more tolerant of other people. I don't agree with pretty much any of the religions out there, but I respect their right to believe what they want and have access to those ideas. And if that's what they want to believe, then great. I'm not going to say, let's kill all the Christians. But if you don't, and it's because we have access to alternative views, they can watch our show and see, and they may come away from it saying, well, I really don't agree with them. I found some holes in their arguments, for instance. But they've got some decent ideas and they make me think. And so while I don't agree with them, they should still have their right to talk. I can say the exact same thing about them. It's when you don't have access to other ideas and you're basically marinated in one particular view that as soon as anything different comes along, you're just saying, no, we can't have any of that. And, kill the Christians, kill the atheists, kill the witches. If you don't have access to alternative views, you're closed off completely. And that's when it gets really, really dangerous. So, no, I don't mind that people don't agree with us on the show. That's perfectly fine with me. The fact that they think, that's great.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
As a reminder, we all get together and go to dinner after the show. We'll be going to Threadgill's on Riverside. The show's over at 6 o'clock. We'll be down there about 6:30. Any atheist or atheist-friendly people are welcome to join us. I've even had, kind of debatey type discussions at some of the dinners when people show up. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that as long as we can keep it friendly and enjoy a meal. We're glad to have you down there. That's on Riverside. We'll be down there around 6:30. Let's go to. That hasn't updated, but I'm going to guess Jessica.
Oh, hello. How are you guys?
Hello. How you doing?
Good. I really thought what Ashley just said was really cool. I'm a Christian, and I really appreciate what other people think about, topics that I personally believe in, which is why I want to ask you guys, what do you think, in your opinion, what was the purpose of Jesus? It's very interesting for me to, hear alternative points of view, so
What do you mean? What do you mean by the purpose of Jesus?
Well, the purpose of Jesus in a Christian's life is a really significant thing, and, it's like the rock, that's we strive to be like, sort of an ideal person.
Okay.
Now, I'm just curious what you guys think. What do you think about that? Like,
Okay.
is that a horrible thing in your eyes, or, I'm just curious.
No. Jesus is one of the characters that may have said some things that made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that thousands of people before Jesus have said the exact same thing. So he's just another one in a long series of people who have said pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
If some people take something from that, great. Hammurabi said some things that were pretty cool too, and he also said some pretty nutty stuff.
Yeah.
As going back one step though, if Jesus actually existed, that's kind of a question that I have a bit more interest in. Was he actually a person, or was it a group of people that, kind of melded into one over time? Is it completely legend, or was there one guy named Jesus who actually said some of these things and they're written down relatively accurately? That's something we don't know. Mm-hmm. But just the fact that he's a character that means a lot to you and said a lot of things that you identify with.
Mm-hmm. Well, so did Albert Einstein, but I'm just wondering, why do you think, that Jesus was so built up, and I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
Oh, historically, why is he still known today, basically, type thing?
Yeah.
Because a large religion was built around him. Now, how that actually happened, I don't have a good answer immediately.
Well, we've seen a lot of instances in the early church where it's really kind of sleazy, and I don't like to talk about it too much because I don't want it to look like I'm using what happened as an argument against the truth of the religion. Okay, the early church was sleazy and in bed with different corrupt governments, and they relied on the poor and got money and built up a control base, and then co-opted holidays and other things from other religions in order to get along, and it spread. But the fact that happened says nothing about whether or not the religion is true or not. I mean, there could have been people misuse a religion that may have been true. So I don't really like to go into detail on that, and don't bother normally. My thing is that, I was a Christian for 20 some odd years.
I wanted to ask you that as well. How did you become an atheist? Like, was it sort of a rebellious thing one day, or what happened?
No, I spent a number of years in the Navy, and after I was out, I went to work. One of the things that happened, of course, is that you grow away from going to church all the time.
Yeah, and that happens to even like full-blown Christians too. Like that's just something.
Oh yeah, no. I was active in some ministry efforts when I was in high school and everything else, and I sincerely believed. But you fall away, you become a backslider or whatever. And at one point, I decided, I think it's 1 Peter 3:15 that says, "Be ever ready to give a reason to anybody who asks what the reason for your faith is." And I thought, I've had these beliefs so long, and I've read the Bible, and I've done, studies, and I'd always felt a nagging thought that maybe I was being called to preach. And so I'm going to study and reaffirm my beliefs and find out what the justification is for what I believe, so that I'm always ready to provide an answer and in preparation for possibly going to seminary. And the more I investigated, the more I found out this doesn't make sense. I started finding things, people would say something, an objection to the Bible, like the story about God sending 2 she-bears to kill 42 kids. And despite the fact that I'd read the Bible, that didn't quite register with me that this was an accurate representation of the story. Either I had misread it or misremembered it or whatever. And going through, I suddenly realized, what? That is an accurate representation. Some kids or youths or gang youth or whatever Bible interpretation you want to use, called Elisha a bald head, which to us doesn't seem like much, but back in those days had a slightly different meaning. But in any case, it's still just a verbal insult. And Elisha cursed him, and God sent 2 bears to rip up 42 kids. Now, that's shocking.
I know. I remember when I wanted to read the Bible, and I was going to start in Genesis and then go back. And by the time I wasn't even halfway through Genesis, I was so upset, and I was like, I hated the world, I hated God, because it's such a horrible depiction of what God is. He's vengeful, he's pissed off at us because we can't never do the right thing. And
it's a good thing you didn't get to Leviticus.
But for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's social conditioning or conditioning through my family. I don't know what the reason is, but I still believe in him, I'll
tell you what, I can understand that. I mean, and, Julia Sweeney's got a great little thing about letting go of God and what it took for her and what it might take for other people. My thing is that, there's just tons and tons of horrible stories about the God of the Old Testament and all the nasty, vicious, sick things he did and ordered to have done, and this obsession with foreskins and circumcision.
Yeah.
It's just obscene. But I always sat back and said, you know what? That's the Old Testament. I worship Jesus. Jesus is quote the Doobie Brothers, just all right with me. But then I started looking into the New Testament, and I found that while it's not as bloody and
it's not as overt,
X-rated as what the Old Testament would be, the fundamental doctrine is worse. In the Old Testament, you died and you slept with your fathers, and that was it. There wasn't this idea that was introduced in the New Testament of eternal punishment for finite crimes and eternal punishment for crimes that somebody else did. Now, Jesus probably said some good things, and I'm sure he did, but reading the Sermon on the Mount, this all-wise prophet said some things that are really, really stupid about selling all your belongings and giving them to the poor and just trusting that God's going to provide you with everything you need. That's not good advice. And I don't just say that. I mean, somebody could say, well, it is. If you'd actually do it and follow it, you'd find out God would provide what you need.
Yeah.
Great. Then why isn't anybody doing that? Show me some preacher who's actually doing that. And I'll show you a guy standing on the corner begging for nickels. Because that's what you end up with. I think my primary objection to New Testament theology isn't so much what the words that are attributed to Jesus. It's what Paul added on to it later, and kind of it turned what could have been, in almost a Buddhistic philosophy in some aspects into this churchy doctrine. But it's way too much for short answers on this show.
I know. I think that it's incredibly hard for us to just trust even our friends in our real life here, and especially when it comes to trusting a God when we don't really have all the answers for that God up there. So I think that it can be very hard to trust that. So even with Christians and people that are involved with religious communities, they find it very hard.
I think the biggest thing that allowed me to get away, apart from spending time where I wasn't receiving constant reinforcement in church, because I tell you what, if you're going to church every Sunday, well, you're never going to change your mind. And I'm not speaking to you specifically. I'm just saying that's just not going to happen.
Well, no, somebody's telling you one point of view constantly, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
and how silly is that? I mean, outside of religion, and Tracy Harris brought this up, I don't feel the need to go to people to find out what I believe or what I'm supposed to believe. And yet, that's what happens in church all the time. You go to hear somebody tell you what you're supposed to believe or what you believe.
Well, I'm sure that happens at your atheist dinners too. No offense, but
actually, not really.
Reinforce your beliefs. So that's
I'd say there's probably more arguments there than anything, because there's no dogma in atheism. There's no. I mean, apart from the fact that we all don't believe in a God or God, that's it. There's nothing else that's dogmatic about atheism. There's no tenets. There's no instructions. There's no holy book. There's no guidelines. And we have Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. We have people who are pro-life, people who are pro-choice. On any given issue, an atheist could go either way depending on what methodology they've used to determine, what their position is going to be.
And there is a lot of debate among us, not necessarily, is there a God or anything, but just about different interpretations and different religions and what they believe and how they work and stuff like that. I mean, we take, pretty much any idea out there and kick it around the table a few times just to see what happens. So, no, this is not something where we all go up there and just blindly follow and,
I don't
yes,
stand,
you are right, yes, you are
I
right.
don't stand at the end of the table and give an atheist sermon.
You don't have a goblet and a big stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pass the bagels.
My horns come out when we get there.
But still, I think, you guys are collectively, grouping together as a body, and you still believe in core issues. That's what Christians do in church at the same time, so.
There's kind of an aspect of that to it. But it's different
it's
too,
different.
In a sense that the only reason that we're getting together as a group of non-believers is because of what the believers are doing, have done, or the position that we're in because of it. If, for example...
Well, that's another question. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think earlier you said something about how, let's not talk about what the Christians are doing to mess things up. What do you think that they're doing to mess up society today? I'm so curious.
Well, first of all, I think that faith, when it's portrayed as a virtue, as a good way to determine things, is poison for the mind. It promotes ideas. First of all, religion promotes the idea that you accept what an authority figure says, that you not question, challenge, or critically examine what your beliefs are. Because in the end, what turned me, what put me in the position to get rid of my Christianity and accept that I was an atheist was the fact that there's absolutely no evidence for the existence of a God. There's absolutely no evidence for Jesus being God, and this is true across the board. It's just something you have to accept on faith. Well, faith. If you accept something that's true, and your reason is faith, then you have a true belief, and that's a good thing. But you don't know it's true until you actually investigate it. Now, if you're unable to distinguish between true beliefs and false beliefs by faith, then faith isn't a good way to determine. Mm-hmm. So that was the core of it. But there are things, Commonly, gay rights, homosexual issues come up. We've talked about that. Apart from
Women's
being against marriage in general, there's no reason to oppose gay marriage other than a religious reason. There's, I don't know, women's rights around the world, and this isn't just Christianity, but I think my biggest personal issue is that faith is a really dangerous thing that can cause people to believe things that aren't true. Let's go with a method that ensures that most of what we believe is as true as possible.
Yeah. I always thought, like, the whole gay issue, maybe it's not necessarily trying to keep certain people from marrying each other, but sort of keep a population growing, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, because that's what we need.
Yeah, but that...
why do you say that, though? Like,
No, I've heard of that idea, but it doesn't make any sense. Right now, I'm engaged to get married. If all of a sudden... What is that?
To a man or a woman? I'm from
Man.
Canada.
No, I'm sorry, a woman. I'm a man. Getting married to a woman. Sorry. But if all of a sudden tomorrow gay marriage were completely legalized and accepted, I'm not gay. I have no desire to try and marry a man. And so the population isn't going to be affected one iota by the fact that now gay marriage is allowed. Because I'm not going to turn gay.
Not only
You
that,
know, it actually doesn't really change anything. I'm from Canada, and we legalized gay marriage, and like it's not like we saw a huge uproar or anything of gay marriages.
Exactly. So
See,
what's the big deal?
I don't understand it. If the two guys who live next door to me are in a loving relationship, whatever, they live next door to me, what difference does it make to me whether they get married or not? It doesn't affect my desire or my ability to get married or not. It doesn't affect how many kids I am or am not going to have. Every one of these issues, you know, it's not like people aren't having sex and making kids without marriage. So all of these little issues that people come up, they're just rationalizations. It's just a phobia. And the only honest answer they can give is that the Bible says that we're supposed to kill gay people. I mean, it says that. It's blatant. It's in Leviticus. So obviously, they shouldn't be getting married. But actually, that's a logical fallacy too, because you could still let them get married and still think they deserve to die. I mean, so there's no reason. But yeah, I don't know. It's not an issue that and wow, did we get way off topic for a long time.
Oh, God, no.
But,
all right, well, thanks a lot for all your input.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for calling. We got like 2.5 minutes left. I guess we can try and get to another caller real quick. George?
Oh, hello. Hi.
How you doing?
Hey.
But I just wanted, how do you guys stay so patient with these Christian religious callers?
I don't know. Some people think I'm not quite as patient as you do.
I mean, it's just incredible. I'm just sitting here, you know, cracking up half the time when they call. But I mean, it's just they don't use any logic at all. It's absolutely no logic, and you guys are like 100% logic.
Well, I don't know if I'd set the
know about
scoreboard
100,
that
but,
high.
yeah.
But
I mean, you guys really try to stay logical. And
I
these
try,
guys
and I appreciate
just
that.
keep repeating this dogma.
Well, and again, that kind of goes back to what they were saying, to what was said earlier, in that when you're arguing with somebody, you don't expect to change their ideas. But everyone else who's listening, they might learn something. And so while I don't expect to change anybody's idea on the show, at least people will learn and hear another point of view, and that's important. And also, it just takes a lot of knowing the fact that every week when you come on the show, it's a new set of viewers more than likely. And so they haven't heard the discussion from last week. And so when they ask the question, I can't just say, well, didn't you watch it last week and call back later? No, they haven't heard it. So explain it one more time.
Well, I want to thank all the religious people. They have a high comedian value.
you know, I really wish there were more people who would actually call in to advocate, you know, like a young earth creationist idea.
It's a lot of fun.
And I'm looking into possibly, it'd be nice to get Ken Hovind to come down when he's done with his legal battles. Right now, of course, he's... See, if you've watched... I'm not going to have time. We got like 30 seconds left, and I'm not going to get to go into it. Do a Google search for Ken Hovind. He's got a bunch of creationist videos. Video 5 goes into a whole bunch of conspiracy theory crap, including you don't have to pay your taxes. And, of course, now he's on trial for not paying his taxes. But thanks a lot for calling, George.
Enjoy your show.
Sorry we ran out
Thanks.
of time and didn't get to you. Anybody who didn't get through, please feel free to email tv@atheist-community.org. Next time we try and do special effects in the intro, we'll work them out in advance. For all you podcast listeners, thanks, and keep in touch. We'll see some of you at Threadgills and the rest of you next week.
Everyone have a good evening.